Welcome to another Get Healthy webinar with one of our brand partners, Berkeley Life. I have John Halbert here. He is the CEO of Berkeley Life, and he is going to just educate us on nitric oxide and these really cool test strips that Berkeley Life has. So they have two products here, the test strips and the product to help if your nitric oxide levels are low. So John, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. And I'm going to start with something that I found as I was doing some research on the brand. And the first thing that I read was, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So I think this is going to lead us into our test strips and why we need to test, who needs to test. Give us the details on that.
Sure. Yeah. So these are the test strips here. I think most people that are kind of been in functional medicine a while will be familiar with them, kind of some of their utility. The quote you referenced there is very apt. And what we try to do is there's measuring, there's managing, but the test strips first function is in understanding and being aware. So a lot of the patients that are walking into functional medicine practices aren't necessarily even aware that they nitric oxide, that they're deficient in nitric oxide. So we find the test strips are a really helpful way to engage the patients on a topic that they might not be familiar with. So doing the test takes all of 15 seconds, and we'll do it here in a second. And it gives the patients a very easy to understand color reading for them to say, okay, well, you're low. Not everyone likes being low, and the majority of patients will be low. But we have a very, easy to follow regimen to improve that either through your diet or your supplementation. So the test strips themselves, they're just a simple chemical assay, which you're measuring the amount of nitrite in your saliva, which is a precursor to nitric oxide in your body. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the different things that this identifies outside of just your nitric oxide levels. But I'll do the test here really quick, and we can show you how fast that happens. So you'll see you might be able to see in the camera here, simple two pads. One is an absorption pad and one is an indicator pad. So you just put the absorption pad on your tongue like that, get some saliva on there. You're going to fold it in half, press the two ends together between your thumb and your forefinger, press them gently together. I took my capsules this morning, so I might be a little more deficient than I should be. But then you get a simple color reading like that, if you can see it. Mm-hmm. So the majority of patients that you will see coming into a practice will be deficient. And that is because the amount of nitrate or dietary nitrate they're consuming in their diet is not sufficient to support their nitric oxide levels, especially as they age. So most of the times with the patients, outside of them seeing the result and being kind of, I suppose, understanding the importance of nitric oxide, which we can get to, they can take two capsules of our product, and in 90 minutes time, when you retest them, they'll see a significant improvement in their test score. So the value of that is that you're educating them on nitric oxide, you're then validating the efficacy of the product, and then the test strip act as a long-term, I suppose, way of keeping patients compliant. So when they come back in for their next visit, test their nitric oxide level, assuming that's a protocol that they've pursued, and you'll be able to see if they're keeping up to date with their nitric oxide supplementation. So that kind of simple test, again, to your point, test, measure, and then manage is something that we can administer with nitric oxide. And it's very rare that you find a supplement that is able to indicate efficacy that quickly.
Yeah, or a test that's that quick too. I'm thinking of some people that, mail in their saliva and it takes days or weeks to get their test results back. That's, I'm shocked at how quick that is. I thought it'd be a few minutes, but that's really quick. One thing I had a question on, you talked about dietary nitrates, bringing your nitric oxide low. What are some things that kind of cause them to become low, and maybe some things in the diet that we can incorporate to increase that and increase those levels?
Sure. I might see if I can share my screen here and just show some of the issues that can arise for people. So your body have two pathways to make nitric oxide. You have the not enzyme-dependent pathway, which involves L-arginine and L-citrulline, and then you have the nitrate pathway, which is where you consume leafy greens, or you can take a product like Berkeley Life and you support the amount of nitrate in the body. So a lot of practitioners would be familiar with nitric oxide products that focus on L-arginine and L-citrulline, which are semi-essential amino acids. Those are effective for people in their 20s and their 30s. You'll commonly see them as pre-workout supplements sold in the likes of GNC and Vitamin Shop, but you'd also see them in the practitioner channel, marketed as nitric oxide products. The challenge there is then it's an enzyme dependent pathway, and over time that enzyme goes through a process called uncoupling, and that can be caused by stress, diet, medication, environmental factors. Any number of things can impact the effectiveness of that enzyme. So by the time you're 40, we commonly refer to that pathway is operating about 50% effectiveness, and that will continue to decline as you age. Our focus is on the nitrate pathway, and what you're doing here is you're giving your body inorganic nitrate. You consume that in your diet or your supplementation. That nitrate is then concentrated in your saliva glands, and in your mouth, the nitrate converts to nitrite using the oral microbiome, and then you swallow your saliva, and then your body will convert that to nitric oxide as needed. So we talked about the test strips and how they're obviously indicative of your nitric oxide levels, but they're also a good indication of the health of your oral microbiome. So it's important that whether you're doing the diet or supplementation, a lot of people are doing different things that could affect the health of the oral microbiome, and that plays a critical role in nitrate becoming nitrite. So if you took 2 of our capsules and tested 90 minutes later and you didn't see a change in the test strip color, that would indicate some issue with the oral microbiome. And that's something that, as a practitioner, you have to be able to understand what are the different factors that might play into that for a patient. And it could be use of antibacterial mouthwash, antibiotic use, teeth whitening toothpaste, anything that you're doing that's quite harsh to the mouth and quite harsh to the oral microbiome in the mouth. So that's a factor we try to raise awareness of practitioners, but I think most patients that are kind of informed and educated enough to be attending or going to functional medicine practices generally aren't partaking in a lot of those habits. But let me see if I have it here. When we think of nitrate and the product that we have, what we're looking to do is take the plant-based equivalents of a leafy green diet and offer to people in a 2-capsule dose. Now, obviously, there's a ton of things in leafy greens, like different micronutrients and other things that are incredibly beneficial. And we'll always say if a patient goes the route of taking dietary action to increase their nitric oxide levels, that's massively preferable. And also, the test strip will react just the same. So if you have a big bowl of arugula or take 2 of our capsules, the test strip will show up with an improvement in your levels. It just happens that the standard American diet is almost devoid of nitrate, or definitely doesn't have enough nitrate to maintain your nitric oxide levels to an adequate standard. So what we're giving you in 2 capsules is the equivalent of about 5 ounces of spinach, 7 ounces of beets, and it's a standardized dose every day. So we generally recommend take 2 capsules first thing in the morning, and that will keep your levels optimal for about 6 to 8 hours. And then at lunch and dinner, if the patient just has small portions of leafy greens, that means that they're able to maintain their levels throughout the day. And that's really optimal for nitric oxide and for general cardiovascular health.
Yeah, this list is helpful to see, just what people, first of all, I look at this and I think people aren't eating this in in their day. The standard American diet consists of none of this, maybe potatoes if you fry them in, some vegetable oil, but this is a good, look into what's really going to keep your nitric oxide levels high. And I like that you said if you take 2 capsules in the morning and then maybe incorporate one of these things for dinner, it can kind of level out a little bit and help you maintain, which is really nice that it's, not a ton of capsules 3 times a day. So
sure.
You can see in the test strips too that it's working.
One or two things that we'll often go to conferences and meet with practitioners and test their levels. And again, at conferences, practitioners are often depleted or low as their nitric oxide scale will show. And they'll be surprised and they'll be like, "Oh, but I had Brussels sprouts last week," or "I always eat asparagus." And you're like, those in themselves are good for, I'm sure, a lot of things in terms of your health and wellness, but specifically for nitrate, dietary nitrate, they're not overly effective. We really look to focus on things in the far left-hand column. And also to emphasize that we recommend 2 capsules first thing in the morning because, as I mentioned, even 2 capsules of our kind of quite potent nitric oxide formulation, that lasts 6 to 8 hours. So if you think of first thing in the morning, you've hopefully slept for 7 or so hours. So generally, or more often than not, people are waking up depleted in nitric oxide. So it's just an effective way to start your day and maintain your levels is to take 2 capsules first thing in the morning.
Is this something that could keep someone awake if they took it later in the day, like a caffeine effect or anything?
No, not at all. Actually, we've done full webinars on not full webinars on sleep, but we've definitely done components webinars on the benefits of nitric oxide for effective sleep. And that's one of the more anecdotal feedback we get is when people optimize nitric oxide, and they tend to sleep much better. And that's something that we'll be diving into more in the back half of the year, because we feel, sleep obviously has other health impacts that can impact nitric oxide levels, and it kind of can become a vicious cycle if you're not maintaining your NO levels. So sleep is one of the things that we hear anecdotally that people really see and they start maintaining their nitric oxide levels.
Sure. And then you mentioned around age 40 is you really start to recommend testing. Is that just due to the natural decline, just timely check-in? What's the age situation there?
Absolutely. So let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. So let me know if you can see that. So a rough graph that we share with people in terms of the decline of nitric oxide levels. So when you're in your teens and 20s and early 30s, the citrulline pathway is working effectively and contributing nitric oxide to the system. But as I said, as you age, that starts to decline and your body starts to rely more on the nitrate pathway. So this graph here on the right just illustrates the decline. And as you can see here, around the age of 40, that decline kind of starts to occur quite rapidly. So how that will manifest in patients will vary from patient to patient. So some patients it could be high blood pressure, some patients it could be sexual function concerns, male or female, cognitive decline, peripheral circulation, any number of circulatory issues, but they all tie back to a common decline in cardiovascular health, endothelial function. So our recommendation to practitioners is just have one of these in your waiting room, have one of these in your treatment room. And as patients come through as part of their normal workup, especially patients over the age of 40, just test their levels. Again, it takes 15 seconds. We have a lot of practitioners that see, nitric oxide as another, can't remember the word, but kind of biomarker essentially, or another, word is gone. But they'll do it with every patient at that age. And because they're deficient and because most patients over the age of 40 are seeing some issues with circulation, however it manifests, it's an important thing to raise patients' awareness of. It can occur in patients that are younger. Like if we think of any type of serious inflammatory issues can impact the nitric oxide in your body, regardless of age. But more often than not, it's patients over the age of 40 that are suffering from some of these issues.
Yeah, so you mentioned some people with inflammatory issues. I see here men have kind of sort of a sooner decline than women in their nitric oxide. Are there any lifestyle contributors that, or things going on in their lifestyle that might make them think maybe this is due to low nitric oxide, like we mentioned cardiovascular disease, anything along those lines that might get them into this, to their practitioner's office to get tested?
So we've started to transition more into this way of speaking because we have key indications or applications of nitric oxide, which are kind of broad and relatively high level. And while they'll ring true for a lot of practitioners, what we wanted to emphasize more is like what's walking into your office. What are the issues that your patients are complaining about that you can logically tie back to nitric oxide as a potential component. We talked about high blood pressure, low stamina. Again, with better blood flow, better oxygenation to the body, you're going to see energy levels improves. Gastrointestinal concerns. This is something Beth Shirley, who's the head of our scientific advisory board, has done fantastic work on understanding the benefits of not just nitric oxide, but also nitrates in your gut health. Anything around peripheral circulation. So however that manifests in patients, be that kind of issues with neuropathy, cold hands, cold feet. Again, that's all nitric oxide related. When we talk about things that, that affect your nitric oxide levels, stress is a huge one, medication, certain medications, I should say, different environmental factors, which we'll talk about here short in a webinar in the future. We have diet. So in the way that diet can be your way to improve nitric oxide levels, a poor diet, a lot of, saturated fats, all those types of things can actually affect your nitric oxide because of the inflammation it causes. Patients that walk into with, ED issues, women with low libido, low responsiveness, all nitric oxide issues. So you can see here that it's a broad spectrum of complaints that can come in. but we try to empower practitioners to understand, think of nitric oxide as all things circulation, and then apply that logic to the patient sitting in front of you and understanding, okay, how is what they're complaining potentially tied to impacted circulation? And to kind of wheel it back a small bit, like when we think of Berkeley Life as a brand, we mentioned to you before we jumped on here that we've been around since 2017, and our company is, our DNA is in direct to consumer. So we did kind of TV ads, radio, et cetera, and that's how we started the journey with Berkeley Life. We tried to promote it for blood pressure, and we did test strips, and we thought we were doing everything right. But when we started to understand all of the different ways that nitric oxide can be utilized and can be effective, we understood that it is important to have a middle person to kind of understand the patient's needs. So a practitioner is able to, apply nitric oxide most effectively because they can see a patient's full history and how this product might affect or benefit them. And while Berkeley Life is very effective in supporting blood pressure, it has so many other uses that we're kind of underselling and under supporting it by just focusing on that one area. So that's why we can't do this in a TV ad or a Facebook ad, but a practitioner, in every time they're talking to a patient, they're able to do the test and then run through this type of a list of potential complaints to understand where nitric oxide fits in their protocol. And if we think of these issues, and okay, these will benefit these issues, also anything else the patient is going through or working on, better circulation is going to benefit. So whatever supplement they're on, whatever devices you're using, if they're able to get circulation where it needs to go in the body, then they're logically going to see better results.
And one thing you said to me earlier, we're kind of brainstorming things involving nitric oxide, but you said to me, what motivates people to take action? So some of these things, if you're, have low stamina or low libido, those are going to be some of the things that are really going to motivate people to get better. High blood pressure, I feel like that's just part of, the routine when people get their checkup from their PCP. It's not really taken that serious in terms of functional medicine, integrative health. So some of those things, if you have sore muscles or GI concerns, numbness, some things like that, I think those might be some of the things that motivate people to take action. But I think people aren't super educated on nitric oxide and what it does for the body. I mean, someone like me, I see the list of the food on there, and I'm going right for the list of the highest nitric oxide levels and already planning my next grocery list. But unfortunately, with the standard American diet and the standard American lifestyle, we're just leaning more and more towards low nitric oxide and bringing that level of age 40 lower and lower. We talked about people in their 20s. It might be unlikely for someone healthy, athletic, but that's not your typical 20-30-year-old anymore. They're more sedentary. So we're seeing this more and more.
Yeah, and for us, not for us, but just when you understand the research and the science of nitric oxide and really a lot of things that you see in functional medicine, the sooner people start, the better. But we have to be realistic that not many people are comfortable going the completely preventative. People will respond to a stimulus and will respond to a pain point. And unfortunately, high blood pressure every day doesn't really manifest itself in things that impact a patient's standard of living. But ED does, and we talk to our practitioners a lot about the canary in the coal mine, and ED is a classic example of that. And if that's what it takes for the patient to start taking their cardiovascular health seriously, then so be it. That's fantastic. But it is often puzzling to us that it is, if you tell someone they'll drop dead of a heart attack in 2 weeks' time, they'll be like, I'll take my chances. And if you say they can't perform in the bedroom tonight, they'll probably throw their checkbook at you. So it's kind of whatever motivates the patient. But at the end of the day, once they're supporting their circulation, that's going to benefit them, their long-term health. The other thing, and we didn't talk about it as we worked through the diet element, is while going the dietary route is really, really important and really beneficial, and even if you do start taking a product like Berkeley Life, it's also important to maintain the dietary nitric intake through your diet. It's being conscious or aware of the source of those leafy greens. So there's incredible research done by Dr. Nathan Bryant, who's probably one of the top researchers in the nitric oxide space, and looking at different leafy green sources. So getting the same spinach or celery from New York or Dallas or Raleigh, North Carolina or LA, and the amount of nitrates in the vegetables varies dramatically. So we have a really interesting chart that we've derived from that research that was done. And again, it's not to put people off, it's just to understand that even if you go the dietary route, integrating the test strips is always an important piece, because the test strips will give you an idea of how much nitrate you're actually consuming and whether the source of your nitrate are actually effective.
Yeah, and we were talking about Pittsburgh before this, where I'm from, and unfortunately, I don't think we have, we don't have a ton of sunlight, so our oil quality, I don't think I'm really getting, too much local nitric oxide. So, even for someone like me who's fairly active, I mean, I live where it's cold most of the year, so sometimes it's hard to get up and out. My diet is, I would say, better than the majority of people, around me, but I put my best efforts forward. But I think there are some days where I lack a little bit more. So even if you're, healthy, as you age, this is just part of the decline, and environmental factors, lifestyle, all these things. There is a need for supplementation. And as much as I talked with dietitians and, you look at things on paper, you look at what foods are rich in this and rich in that. But if you look at, greens from 100 years ago, the nutrient quality is much different. And you talked about location too. That's another great point to it, that, just because this is what it says it is, doesn't mean it contains what it should. So that's another really good point.
And I think one thing to point to in terms of the testing and the product, like we do have obviously a very concise or very narrow product line, and from our point of view, we'd rather stick to that and help people really understand the depth of benefits of nitric oxide in their practice. But we do a very regular cadence of support and education around all the different ways nitric oxide can be used, and we really try to make our experts available to practitioners in our network. And understanding the platform here is through Get Healthy. Those things are all similarly available to people that work with Get Healthy as they are to people that work directly with us. So, one of my hopes in this webinar is that people will leverage us as a resource. We're really fairly agnostic as to where people get the product. The most important thing for us is that the maximum benefit is being derived from it. So, really encourage people to reach out and help us get a level of understanding in their practice, be it with them as the practitioner or as their whole staff, about administering the test strip, like having the talking points to work through with the patient so that they're comfortable as to why they're adding this to their product stack. We're very keen to make sure that there's a complete understanding, because oftentimes we'll have a practitioner start the product and they'll be excited about it, but none of their staff are aware of what to do with it. In reality, anyone could administer that test. It takes, as we said, about 10 to 15 seconds to do.
Yeah. Well, that shows good integrity on your company. And so would you consider this kind of a foundational product or foundational part of, just daily supplementation?
Yeah, I don't know where you set me up for that, but we did call our product the Nitric Oxide Foundation.
Okay. I'm big on foundations, so
Yeah.
this is just, perfectly lining up.
So we're very careful on that front, because as we've talked about the fundamental importance of circulation to really, a lot of bodily systems. Beth, who I mentioned earlier, she'll always talk about how nitric oxide plays a role in every physiological process of the body. What we found is going out there and saying that type of thing to a practitioner or to a patient is, if you're good for everything, you're kind of good for nothing. So we try to make it as acute as possible to that patient's need or that practitioner's practice focus or practice type. But it is true that, what we believe is that, having a foundation of healthy nitric oxide levels is going to make the patient see better success from whatever other treatments they're going through. If they're doing it proactively to prevent issues that they see on the horizon, or as a retroactive measure, I think they'll see similar benefits. And really, the test strip, while it plays a really important role in education and validating, is not something a patient needs to do on an ongoing basis. So we have the test strip tubes here, but they're really something that a practitioner would carry in their practice, administering on an as needed basis. And you'll have some patients that are, either super into the science or wants to trial with their diet, or you'll have patients that are maybe high performance athletes that want to test on a very regular cadence for training or competition. But those are definitely edge cases in most scenarios. Once a patient sees the before and after, that's more than they've seen with a lot of products they've taken in the past. So they're convinced and they're comfortable to take this product on an ongoing basis. But as you can see, the formulation itself is quite simple. And down here we'll have, that's the proprietary blend that we have. And that's giving people the equivalent of about 5 ounces of spinach or 7 ounces of beets in each 2 capsule dose. And, depending on how active they are, it lasts about 6 to 8 hours each day.
And you don't have any crazy added emulsifiers or any icky ingredients that we don't need in there. So that's always nice to see as well.
Yeah, we went through a process, I don't know, was it 2 years ago? We had magnesium stearate and silicon dioxide in there as the other ingredients, and worked with Beth to identify ingredients that were more palatable. She's quite a stickler for the ingredient side of things. I think we've come out with a much better product. And that's kind of a standard for us going forward, is to use those with the ribose as the brand ingredient, just to make sure that we're not giving the patient anything they don't need.
Right. And to your last point, talking about having these managed by practitioners, well, one thing in the last few years, and I think even still, practitioners are doing more and more virtual consultations and working with patients all over the globe, and not necessarily just in their office. So the test strips, as much as they should be under a practitioner's guidance, they can do them at home with a practitioner. If you set up their Zoom consultation, you take 15 seconds at the beginning of your call and your results are right there. So that's another really great feature about it. And then, like you mentioned, whether they're getting these from their Get Healthy store, directly from their practitioner's office, this Nitric Oxide Foundation is available. You can just take 2 capsules in the morning. We just have a couple minutes left. So is there anything else that you kind of want to bring home talking about this product?
Just on that point, actually, it's a really good one I hadn't thought of, is around the telehealth or remote patient care. I think what you mentioned as an option is ideal, where the patient would purchase the test strips on their Get Healthy store. Alternatively, we have the ability, I don't think it's set up at Get Healthy store, but if there's a demand, we have individual foil wrap test strips. And over the pandemic or during COVID, we had a lot of practitioners that were mailing these out to their patients. And depending how they're fulfilling, but it just is a good way if you're looking to engage patients, be like, send them the flyer, test your levels, call me if you're low. And that is incredibly effective, because you're giving the patient something for free, you're offering value, you're kind of prompting them to reach out to you. So as a way of engaging and keeping the patient kind of loyal, it's something that's found to be very, very effective in utilizing the test strips. So we're happy to figure out a way that we can take care of our Get Healthy practitioners that way. But for us, the test strips are a tool to educate on the supplement. It's not, we obviously retail them and they're quite popular, but that's their fundamental goal is to be an educational tool. I'm trying to see here just a couple of things on pricing. Patient pricing, $49.99 for a single box. That will last most patients about a month, and some patients will do additional dosing, but it's up to you, the practitioner, to guide the patient on that. We talked about the kind of other brands, or the types of brands. We have a lot of arginine or citrulline products. And you'll see a lot of products in the market that are beetroot powders, are claim to have nitrates. And the best way to understand what's effective or what's not, versus maybe what patient practitioners are currently carrying or recommending, use the test strips. A lot of times we'll have practitioners who will have taken their nitric oxide products at a conference, and they'll come to our booth and they'll test, and there'll be no result in the test strip. So for us, that's validating for what they're taking, maybe not giving them what they expected. And then another important one is the contraindications. So really commonly asked about the contraindications or potential contraindications. The way to look at that is if a patient can consume a big bowl of spinach, they can take our product. So very, very well tolerated, can be taken with or without food. I think the box, it says take with food, but no issues for that. Even as one more additional caveat, we have patients or practitioners will often ask us about concerns around oxalate sensitivities. So oxalate's obviously very common in leafy greens. We've tested our product on the oxalate levels, and it's completely negligible. So we have a lot of patients that would have generally oxalate concerns and can't consume leafy greens that have no issue taking our product.
Well, that's all good news to hear. I'm just thinking, I feel like the nitric oxide, level should be part of a intake form or, lifestyle questionnaire, but people wouldn't really know the answer. So the test strips are definitely important to have when working with your clients, and of course the foundation support of the product. So John, thank you so much for being on here with us. We appreciate you, and we appreciate Berkeley Life and your products.
Fantastic.